content list of courses that is being retrieved from the server. Right now, we're doing that from our ng on init. Right? We're fetching that content, and we are copying into a local state variable. Now, this, just like in React, we know that this is a bad practice, right? That components should not do their own access their data. Instead, there should be some dedicated service file that is dedicated, encapsulates and modularizes the interaction with the remote server. So let's do that. We're going to, in a separate file, inside of our app directory, we're going to create a services directory. And in that directory, we're going to create a service file, TypeScript, not JavaScript, TypeScript. And we'll call it the course service client, TypeScript. Okay, and we're going to add it to our Git. So in here, what we're going to do is that we're going to create a class. We're going to export the class, and we'll call it course service client. And what we're going to do is that we're going to encapsulate this logic, this logic of fetching the data and then parsing it. We're going to encapsulate it inside of a function called something like find all courses, right? Which does exactly what we want there. Very good. Okay. Now we want to be able to call this function from within our components. We want to replace this, right, with this function right here, encapsulated inside of this. So we would like to be able to reuse this class. Now, typically in React, what we would do is that we would import, right, this and then use it, using ES6 syntax. Here, what we're going to do instead is that we're going to use a higher level abstraction, right, that Angular provides, which has copied from the middle tier development world, okay, which is inversion of control, right. Well, what we're going to do is something similar to what we do in Java, where we declare something to be a service, and then we can auto-wire it, right, into our code, right. And then what we're doing is that we're delegating the lifecycle management of an object. We're delegating it to the infrastructure, meaning I don't want to handle this. Use the factory pattern and the inversion of control design pattern. Have the framework deal with the lifecycle, and then just inject that whenever I ask for it, either in a constructor or by annotating it in my class. So to allow that to happen, we need to annotate this. We're going to annotate this class as injectable, right? Which brings into connotation, right, of the whole inversion of control, auto wiring, injection of instances of these objects into our namespace. Right, now that it's injectable, we do need to declare it as a global resource provider that provides a resource of data, right, so that it can be accessed from the rest of the application. We do that in the modules, right? Remember, the app modules is a central configuration file, right, that allows us to declare things to be globally accessible throughout the application. We're going to declare it in our providers. We're going to say in our providers, a data provider, we're going to say that our course service client is going to be a data provider that is going to be injectable, or can be injected into anyone who asks for it by name, right? Just like the auto wire, right? Okay, so how do we use this? Right, we can go back to our component now. Now our component, we can replace this with that resource, right? With that provider. The way we're going to do that is we're going to ask for it by name in our constructor. We're going to say, hey, framework, when you instantiate me, pass me an instance of that object. Right? I want an instance of that course client. Right? So we can declare a local variable as being private, and we're going to say we're going to call it a service. This is a variable that is going to be available in my component, right? And we're going to declare the type is a course service client. There it is. Okay. We're asking the framework, hey framework, instantiate one of these and pass it to me as an argument. Right? This is the equivalent in Java of doing at auto wire. Okay. But for AutoWire to work, you need to declare that object as a service or a component, right? And then the magic of AutoWire works, right? Here is slightly different. The syntax is slightly different. Actually, in Java, you could do the same thing. In Java, instead of using AutoWire, you could use a constructor, right? In the constructor in Java, you can do the same thing, right? You can ask for a variable by a data type, and the framework will call you when it instantiates you. It will pass you an instance of that object that you want, and then it's your responsibility to copy it in a local variable. Yes, right. So that would be similar to what's happening here. Okay, now that we have the service, we can now do we can replace this. We can replace this whole thing with this dot service dot, there it is, the find all courses, right? Find all courses, and it returns the promise, which we can then extract the courses from there. Right? If we go back to our content, notice that it renders identical to what we had earlier. Make sense? Right? So the same implementation, same logic, right? But using best practices, right? Of encapsulating all data access into a reusable service, right? So that you might not be the only one who's using this data, this service, right? There might be other components who are using the same service, right? And they can all ask for the same service instance. Also, other design patterns that are being used here is obviously inversion of control. Yes. Also, the singleton pattern, right? There's only one instance of this service going around in the application, and any component that asks for this service will get the same instance, right? So we're not reinstantiating this over and over, right? All the components would be using the same exact instance. So it's implementing the singleton pattern. Also, we're not instantiating it ourselves. We're not saying new, right? That would instantiate it. Instead, we're delegating this to so we're kind of using like the factory pattern, right? So we're delegating the framework is instantiating it from us, right? It's providing that instance for us. So there's several design patterns, best practices involved in using this framework. And again, Angular is really heavily encourages us to use all these design patterns and these best practices. Okay.